Hello everyone! In this video I'm going to be looking at all the key positions from every game between Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemannn, specifically moments where blunders were made. I'm going to look at how many blunders were made by each player, and I'm going to give you some training opportunities to find the best move along the way. Alright, let's get started. Okay, this first position comes from round 7 of the Air Things Masters tournament. Hans Niemannn with the white pieces, Magnus Carlsen's playing black. Now Carlsen has already sacrificed the exchange. You'll notice he has 2 bishops and a rook versus Niemann's 2 rooks and a knight. And so he really needs to win at least a pawn here. But in this position he goes wrong. What would you play here as black? See if you can find the move that Carlsen missed. Best move for black here is queen to e4, targeting d5. White doesn't have a good way to defend that pawn. Let's say you try queen b3, well there's bishop c4. If you try rook to d1, then that takes protection off of e3. The black queen can take on e3. If you play queen to d2, now there's bishop takes e3 with an attack on white's queen, and if the queen moves, queen to f4 check gets out of the pin on his bishop. One final defense, rook to d2. This runs into bishop takes e3. And the bishop's pinned for the moment, but there's a threat of queen to f4 check followed by taking the rook. So white would need to move the rook here. You move the rook to like c2, but then there's bishop here, and the rook's going to have to go to some crappy square like b2. And then queen to f5, no more pin on this bishop here, and black is doing fine. What Carlsen played in the game was bishop to g7, and this allowed Niemann to play queen c2. If queen d5 is played, there'll be the exchange of queens like this. Now let's talk about bishop takes e3 in case anyone was wondering about that move. Bishop takes e3. In this position it's not good because white can take over this file here. You'll notice in that other variation this queen was here, and in this position the rook got attacked. But there's no bishop d3 here, and this is an uncomfortable pin on this bishop. Black can get out of it with bishop f4 check, but then after the king moves, the queen's under attack. Queen can go to d7, but then white can infiltrate on this file or take the rook first. White is much better here. The computer's giving queen to f6 actually as the best move. So one blunder for Carlsen. In this position, if you would have played queen to e4, it would have been roughly equal, still a bit in white's favor. The computer did not like his sacrificing of the exchange earlier, but white wouldn't have been winning, as was the case after bishop g7, queen c2. Next position is from the same game. Hans Niemannn with the white pieces does not find the right move here. See if you can. What should white play? The best move for white is king to g1, defending this rook so that this knight is free to move. We want to take on e5. So if black tries to go after this pawn, we can take on e5, and if the queen takes, we can take on f7 with the rook. With what Niemann played, queen to d5. His plan is to take this pawn with the queen, but this allows Carlsen to play rook c6, and after queen takes here. And then there's a trade of queens. Plays knight g5, trying to go after that pawn, but then bishop blocks. And it's a dead drawn position, according to the engine. Our next position comes from the same game. Hans Niemannn with the white pieces goes wrong here. What do you think white should play? Rook to a6 was necessary to maintain the draw. Now the threat is, the knight goes to here with a discovered check on the king, winning the bishop. So let's say you move the king. Now there's h6 check. The pawn starts to go forward and the king cannot capture the pawn, or else there's the discovered check. You lose your bishop. So maybe the bishop should move. Bishop to a3. Now we got knight to e4 check. And if the king takes on h5, this is very dangerous because knight to g3 check, and the king's only move is h4, and now the knight will be protected by the king, and this king has no squares. There is a very dangerous threat of checkmate if the rook can get to here or here. That is too dangerous for black. White is winning in that position. So that pawn cannot be captured. Instead, the king has to go back and is cut off from these pawns. And here, h6 can be played, defended by the rook, and then the king moves, and then the knight can grab on g5. White should be okay. The king is cut off. Black has 2 extra pawns, but this pawn is advancing also. The computer says it's a draw. What was played in the game was king to g2. And now bishop c3 just threatens to take the knight. So if you try to this rook thing again, just take the knight out, rook takes, and then the king can take on h5. There's too many pawns. White's not going to survive. What was played in the game was knight to g8 check, but then the king takes here, and then Niemann tries rook a6, threatening a checkmate here, but then we got bishop e4 check, and after the king moves here, there's another check, driving the king back, and then once this pawn move is made, the king has a square here, and this pawn is moving forward, and white is losing. Niemann resigned. Yeah, Niemann resigned right here. That's the first game between Hans Niemannn and Magnus Carlsen. That was from February of 2022, by the way. So let's move on. This next position comes from round 5 of the Charity Cup tournament from March of 2022. Hans Niemannn with the black pieces goes wrong with the move queen to h6, trying to get tricky, targeting 2 undefended pieces. Looks good on the surface, but Carlsen finds a nice sequence of moves. He plays knight d to f5. Doesn't this just lose a piece? After bishop takes f5, knight takes f5. I don't know if Niemann missed this tactic, but at this point, if he were to play rook takes f5, queen takes d5 check, would win this rook here. So you're not winning a piece on f5. So at this point, Niemann, his queen is under attack. He needs to do something about that. If you just move the queen, let's say you go queen to e6, Carlsen can actually take the pawn on d5. Because if the queen takes, there's knight e7 check, winning the queen back. So Niemann opts for this knight to f3 check. The point is here, if you take the knight, now rook can take on f5. Now this pawn's defended. There's no queen takes, winning the rook here. So what Carlsen played was queen takes f3. This knight's defended by the queen. This queen's under attack. If you take the queen, there's going to be knight takes h6. So Niemann played queen to b6 check, getting his queen out of danger. Carlsen's queen is still attacked, but he has queen to e3, defended by the knight, and he has to lose his knight. But then he grabs the queen, and after this, the 2 bishops are just too powerful. So what happens here is Carlsen just goes to work on the position, targeting the pawns, and there's a nice little tactic here. This pawn cannot be saved. It looks like it's adequately defended, but then here Carlsen finds this move rook to d4. Threatening to take here, this pawn is pinned to the king. And so what are you going to do? You can't do that and try to add defense because there's bishop g3. So the game went on a little longer, but Carlsen was able to win this with the 2 bishops. This next position comes from the same tournament. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces has an extra piece here, but Hans Niemannn playing black does have a couple extra pawns, and Carlsen's king is looking pretty exposed. So Niemann goes wrong with the move rook to c1 check. He needed to leave the rook guarding this rank and play queen to b6 check instead. This would force the king towards the middle, and it couldn't go this way towards the safety of g3. If you try king h1, this loses for white because rook to f2, attacking the queen. The queen has too many responsibilities. She has to defend this knight here, and let's say you go queen g3. Well, now there's rook f1 check, king g2, then rook g1 check, defended by the queen. You're going to lose your queen. So the queen doesn't have a safe square. If you try something like queen to e4, now white gets in trouble since the f2 square has been neglected. There's rook f1 check, king here, and then the queen comes in. This is getting very nasty. The knight's going to be won. So king h1 is not working. You need to go king to f1, and then the move is rook c1 check. The king is going to have to continue to go towards the center. If you go to king to g2, then there's just rook c2 check. Black would be happy with the repetition here. If the king goes forward, now there's queen g1 check. The knight can go in the way, and then queen a1, targeting this pawn if this rook moves. This gives black enough activity. What was played in the game, though, made life too easy for Carlsen. Rook c1 check, and then the king is just headed to g3. Then Niemann played this check here, and the knight actually went in the way. King g3 was also possible. Rook to e1 played by Niemann, looking to win that knight. King f2 defends. Queen b1, threatening this, which would win the queen. So the queen moves to d3, and this was a blunder by Carlsen. He threw away his win. What he needed to play was queen to g2, preventing this check right here. But after queen to d3, rook f1 check, king e3, now queen to e1, looking to come in this way. Carlsen plays e6, but after this queen f2 check, king here, he allows a repetition after queen f2 check, because if you start going this way with the king, it's not great. Queen to g2 check, the king's getting driven into the center of the board, and then the rook and queen are very active here. You got this, and I guess the engine says grab this pawn here, and maybe black is winning. This king is in such a dangerous position. In this next game, Hans Niemannn has the white pieces, Carlsen playing black. Material is roughly equal, and Niemann blunders here with the move rook to c3. Engine said he should have played the rook to f1 or c4, but after rook to c3, see if you can spot Carlsen's strongest response here. Carlsen played knight to f4, threatening a triple fork. The king, the rook, and this pawn, also opening up this attack by the bishop on that pawn on g4. So if you try to defend rook b3, you know, there's just going to be, well, bishop takes g4 is what the engine's saying. Now this pawn's being targeted, this pawn's being targeted. It's no good. What's played in the game is king to f2 and then knight to d5. The rook moves here. If you move over here to try to defend, again, bishop takes g4. So rook g3 is tried, but now there's knight to f6, threatening another fork. Carlsen ends up winning this. He could have just taken on b6, I believe, right here, and still been winning also. But that move that he played, knight to f6, threatening this fork, was even stronger. And then he ends up doing this. And then he gets the pawn a little bit later after improving the position of his pieces. This pawn wasn't really going anywhere. So Carlsen won that game. In this next position, we're still in the same tournament, Charity Cup. Hans Niemannn with the black pieces makes the wrong move here. He goes e4. The engine's recommending to take on d4, and after this big exchange, rook takes e8, knight takes. The knight can go here with the fork of the queen and bishop. That's fine, the queen can move. We take here, but then black is able to give white a bad pawn in the center of the board after this big exchange. So both sides end up with not the ideal pawn structure, but the material is even, and it should be roughly equal. But after this e4 move that Niemann played, this clears the e5 square, knight to c4, hitting the queen. Once the queen moves, a knight gets to jump into e5. It's a very nice square for Carlsen to land one of his pieces. Bishop e6 played by Niemann, bishop f4 by Carlsen. The computer is recommending to just take on e5 and then maybe take on c4. White is definitely better, but Niemann plays knight d5 here, giving up this pawn. So Carlsen said, I'll take the pawn, and I'm not worried about f5. Maybe this is what Niemann thought would give him a good position. But Carlsen has a tactical shot here. Knight takes c6. This rook cannot keep defending this bishop, but after taking the knight on c6, the queen is hit, so that must be addressed. B takes c6. Now Carlsen sacks the exchange, taking on e6, and after rook takes, his bishop goes to safety. Okay, so he sacked the exchange, but look at these horrible pawns of black's. And look at this bishop that's completely shut out of the game. White has control of the e5 square and does have a pawn for the exchange, so Carlsen went on to win this game. For our next position, we're in a new tournament, the FTX Crypto Cup from August of 2022. Magnus Carlsen here has the white pieces, Hans Niemannn playing black, and Magnus blunders with knight to e1. What he needed to play was something like queen to a4, leaving the knight here. That was important because if h5 is played, black would like to launch an attack on this king. You can respond h4. This pawn has adequate protection, and then if g4 is played, knight g5 check. Lines are not going to be opened up around your king. But moving the knight to e1, this allowed h5. And here, Carlsen realized he can't play h4. If you play it here, there's pawn takes. You'd like to take it with the knight, but you can't anymore. And if bishop takes h4, queen g4 wins material, attacking the bishop, attacking the rook. So you can't play your h4. Carlsen put the knight back to f3, hoping to get in h4, but then Niemann gets to play h4, driving the bishop back. And then after a couple more moves, eventually he does get in his g4. He's got a strong attack, and lines open up near the white king. Niemann's pieces come in, and the threats are too great. And Niemann ends up winning this game. This next position's from the same tournament. Hans Niemannn with white, Carlsen with black. Carlsen's up a pawn, but Niemann might be able to survive this. He plays the right move. The engine's suggesting king f1, maybe go to g2, because this king is cut off by this rook. It's not getting into the game this way, so maybe that's why the engine likes it going over this direction. But Niemann, he plays this rook f1 move, which is really weird. And after Carlsen plays king to g7, Niemann just moves his rook right back to d1. So he's basically lost 2 moves, and this is enough to tip the balance in Carlsen's favor. In our next position, Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces. Hans Niemannn is playing black. Magnus captures on f4. Here's a quiz for you. How to recapture as black? What is the correct move? The correct move is bishop takes f4. When your opponent has the bishop pair, it's good to try to eliminate one of those bishops. White can avoid this exchange by playing bishop to b4 check. The king moves, the bishop can take on b7, but this is not good for white. With this bishop here, rook c2 check. The rook's getting very active and can pick up this h-pawn at the right moment. So that's not very good. And if you take the bishop here, then there's knight takes f4 with check, the king moves, and then b5 can just be played. There's no bishop takes b7. Now contrast that to what was played. Knight takes f4 check. Now Carlsen just moves his king. Now this pawn is under attack, and you don't have the counterattack coming in here. If you move the king, let's say here, and allow bishop takes b7, rook c2 doesn't really do anything. This bishop's blocking any access to this, and bishop e4 can be played just hitting the rook. What was played in the game was a bad move, b6. It didn't really solve anything because bishop b7 comes in and wins the pawn on a6. Carlsen ended up winning this game. This final game from the FTX Crypto Cup that we're going to look at was a complicated one. It has Hans Niemannn with the white pieces, who is down the exchange but up a pawn. Magnus Carlsen playing black. Carlsen just played bishop to f8 here to guard against knight e7 check. And now Niemann has to deal with this threat to his b-pawn, and he makes the wrong move here. The engine is suggesting to just take out the knight, and after rook takes c6, play b3. But Niemann plays b3, allowing the knight to stay on the board, and it goes to a3. And the engine does not like this because the knight is, okay, it's attacking c2, so Niemann just plays c4, and Carlsen now makes the wrong move. Instead of playing knight c2, which is correct, planning to go here and challenge this knight, which is on a very strong post, it's going to help protect this b-pawn as it advances. That would have been the right move, knight c2, but Carlsen throws away his winning advantage with knight takes b5. After c takes b5, maybe he still thinks he can win with rook a3, attacking the pawn. Niemann defends with rook d3, which is not the most accurate move. The engine says b4 is better, protected by the knight so that this bishop can't get active on c5. But after rook d3, we got bishop c5, and now Niemann blunders away his chances to draw with the move bishop to g5. Apparently that was a bad move because it just wastes a move with that bishop. He's going to lose a tempo in the most critical line. The most critical line is to play g4, so that the king is going to be able to go to g2 after the rook comes in like this. You want to go to g2 so that after rook to a2, you're going to block the attack on f2 with bishop d2. And if the rook comes here, here you can play bishop to h6 with a checkmate threat, and apparently the rook just has to go back. Rook takes f2 check can be met with king g3. So that's the most critical line, and bishop g5 is not a move in that line, so it's just kind of a wasted move. After this, what Carlsen played, the same thing happened, g4, the rook comes to a2, and here Niemann played rook to f3, defending the pawn like this. But let's look at that same line with bishop d2. So Niemann would just be down a move in this line. The rook comes to here, and now you don't have time for any bishop h6 because bishop takes f2 comes with check. If the king was here, that wouldn't be the case, and black would be getting checkmated. So as far as I can tell, that's the reason why bishop g5 is a blunder. Rook f3, though, played by Niemann, and after this, the rooks come in. The bishop defends like this, but then g5 this. Rook a3. And here Niemann throws in the towel because he's going to lose that b pawn. Well, here we are. The game that started all the drama. The game that made Magnus Carlsen quit the Sinquefield Cup, where Hans Niemannn defeated him with the black pieces in what he felt was a suspicious manner. So we're just going to look at the critical moments of this game, starting with Magnus Carlsen's move, g4. Now Carlsen is a pawn down, but he has a very active bishop and rook, and he could hold this game if he played it correctly, but g4 was not accurate. Rook d8 was the best move according to the engine. After g4, what Carlsen is hoping for is f takes g4, and then rook takes e4. But f takes g4 is not what was played. Hans Niemannn found the correct move, rook to c5, attacking the bishop first. Now Carlsen actually made a blunder. The last move was a bit inaccurate, but this move is definitely a game-losing blunder. He played bishop to a2. What he should have done was defend the bishop and allow Niemann to take this pawn here, and then he should put his rook to d7, targeting the f7 pawn, and apparently he can hold this. But after what Carlsen played, bishop a2, here Niemann had the chance to win with f takes g4, and if rook takes here, you get a quick f5 in. The rook can come back to the 7th rank, but now the king's moving forward, getting into the action. You can deliver a check, it doesn't matter, the king can go to g5. And apparently here white cannot overcome the pawn deficit. He doesn't have the well-coordinated pieces anymore, his king's on the back rank. But Niemann did not play f takes g4. He gave Carlsen a chance to draw. Again, he threw away his win with knight c4. According to some deep computer analysis, Carlsen could have drawn the game starting with bishop takes c4, rook takes, take on f5, and then after this line, rook goes after the pawn on a3, rook to b8, b5, rook here, rook takes. Black actually has the extra pawn here and two connected passed pawns, but apparently according to Stockfish, it looks like white can draw this because this king is cut off and cannot come over here to help. But Carlsen sadly did not take the knight on c4. Had he taken that knight, all of the chess drama from the past month probably would not have happened. Instead, he played a4, and this allowed knight to d6, attacking the rook. The rook moves, and then f takes g4. The rook went to d7, attacking the knight, and then a nice touch by Niemann. e3. Carlsen cannot take the knight on d6, or else this move will win. Rook c1 check. White's only move is to put the rook in the way. Rook takes, king takes. E takes f2. You're not going to stop that pawn from becoming a queen. Carlsen saw that. He took the pawn on e3, but after knight to e4, black is threatening rook c1 check. If the rook were to go in the way, which is the only legal move, there's takes, takes, and then the knight fork. So Carlsen plays king to f1. So apparently at this moment after king f1, Niemann again gave Carlsen a chance to draw. He should have played rook f5 check here, defending f7, and after the king moves just b5, starting to advance the pawn, and white is totally lost here according to Stockfish. But his move rook c1 check allows the king to go to g2. f7 is targeted here. Rook c2 played by Niemann. Bishop takes f7. Okay, but Niemann does grab this pawn with check. King goes to g1, and then rook e1 check. And after this, a little back and forth, he plays king f6. And according to some deep analysis by the engine, this should be drawn if Carlsen takes the pawn on b7. But instead, he goes bishop to d5, attacking the knight, which allows this move. The knight cannot be taken now, or you're going to lose your rook. Carlsen saw that he had this check, though. Maybe this was his plan. Then the king goes this way, then he goes back, trying to keep the king out of the action. But here, Niemann has knight to g5. And after this bishop f7 check move, Carlsen is not winning a free rook because of where this knight moved. After rook takes d2, there's knight f3 check. Getting the rook back, the king moves, the knight takes, and then this is the end of the road for Carlsen. We have a few more moves. Niemann's got the extra pawn, and he has this knight which is hopping around, eating up more pawns. So some brilliant play coming from Hans Niemmann in that game, whatever your opinion of him is. And now we have one more game to look at. In our final position, Hans Niemmann is playing white. Carlsen has black. Niemann plays the move d4. Carlsen responds knight f6. And after c4, Carlsen makes a blunder. He resigns in a position that is not lost. Of course, he did have his reasons for doing so, which we're not going to get into. But objectively speaking, it has to be included in our list of blunders. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this coming soon.